Wes Corbett with Peghead Nation. I'm going to talk a little bit about the banjo I'm playing. This is a Hawthorne Top Tension. Hawthorne's a company in Kansas City. They're some of the only folks manufacturing top tension parts in the United States right now. A top tension is a really specific type of banjo that was created by Gibson kind of late in the pre-war golden era. It was maybe their last-ditch effort to try to combat the electric guitar, which was kind of fastly plummeting banjo sales. And it's different from a normal flathead banjo in a number of ways. One is that they came standard with a radius fingerboard, and two, they have a different kind of hardware so that you don't have to remove the resonator to tighten the head. The armrest is removable like this, and then instead of using a normal head tightening tool, you actually use it's like a clock key, so it's square. Pop the clock key in, now you can just tighten the head without having to take the resonator off. The inside of the resonator is also different. Typically, a standard flathead banjo resonator is concave on the inside. Top tensions are actually flat on the inside, and they're also solid hardwood. So this is actually one chunk of maple. It kind of bulges out right here, and it's flat on the inside. So there's actually a chunk of hardwood about this thick on the back of this banjo, which makes them super heavy. But I think that mass contributes to the tone in an interesting way. They tend to be a little more mid-rangey and have more sustain than some other banjos. I really like especially the sustaining quality of top tension banjos, because it just means you, I don't know, just have a little more music to play with within the instrument. This banjo has spikes in it. That's to fret the fifth string when you put a capo on the rest of the banjo. I have spikes at A, B flat, B natural, and C. I actually would like to have an A flat, a G sharp one as well. I just haven't gotten around to it yet, but I need to do that. I typically don't capo ever any higher than that. It's really rare even for me to capo at the fifth fret to play out of like C, for instance. I would usually just play open, do a lot of things open actually. But it is cool to have that high C note sometimes, like maybe if you're playing in F, and instead of playing in open F, you can capo on the third fret and spike up to C here and then play out of D position. Get a really beautiful sound that way. The tailpiece on this banjo is a Price tailpiece. They weren't being made for a while. I think they are being made again. The thing that I like about these tailpieces is that they, instead of, a lot of tailpieces are narrower than the bridge is. So the way the break angle over the bridge happens creates how much tension you actually feel in your fingers. So the really nice thing about these bridges is that it makes the action and everything feel super even string to string. So bridges on your banjo can be an important part of your tone too, part of your setup. Having one that's the right height in particular, and having one that, if you have a radiused fingerboard, is also a radiused bridge, and maybe in an especially perfect world, one that matches the radius of your fingerboard. I have a 5/8 Snuffy Smith on my banjo right now that Ned Lubrecki gave me because he's my neighbor. It's good to have banjo neighbors. I have my head tuned pretty low. So the way people tune banjo heads a lot of the time is you can kind of like scrape it or tap it, but I do this thing where I just let it catch a little bit of my nail. Right? I have it at an F sharp, which is kind of a typical spot that Bela has had his banjo. Bela Fleck has had his banjo at for on and off for a long time. The cool thing about that is that it opens up more sustain. It opens up a lot of overtones, so that the tone is very complex. It maybe isn't quite as like punchy as a typical bluegrass banjo would be when you're tuned down there, but it's kind of just part of my sound. I don't know. People typically have their banjos more at like G sharp, So somewhere around here. So a whole step above where mine's at. And banjo setup is kind of a mysterious thing, but there are kind of windows of head tension that sound good in specific ways. I really like F sharp because it does this kind of like really resonant, open sounding thing. This banjo, just like the original pre-wars, has a radius fingerboard on it, which I like a lot. I just like the playability of it. So radius means that it's curved this way on the fingerboard as opposed to being flat. It just feels more comfortable to me. In particular, playing not Scruggs style, playing like, melodic style and single string passages feel more comfortable on a neck like this. Also, this neck is pretty big, both in terms of, I guess, what I would call depth, which is this way, and it's pretty wide. It's kind of like a half of a baseball bat or something. It's really big. Let's see. A few other differences about this is that this headstock is specific to top tension banjos. This kind of big paddle thing, like kind of an Art Deco vibe going on. You might notice that I have my truss rod cover off. I adjust my action quite a bit when I'm on the road. Banjos tend to, I think, different than other instruments because they're essentially, it's like the neck is bolted on to the body, to the pot assembly, which is what this part's called. So if you, say, put your banjo in your car and then drive for 15 hours, those vibrations tend to kind of loosen things up. Everything's kind of shifting around. So for me, I'm kind of constantly checking in and just I'm not trying to change anything. I'm just trying to keep it the same. As far as strings, I go back and forth with companies, but I've used consistent gauges for a long time. I have a 10 on the first string, an 11 on the second, a 13 on the third, a 20 on the fourth, and another 10 on the fifth string.